Starving Orphan begged for bread, until the widow saw her husband's eyes. The sun was dying over the flat line of the desert when Martha heard the knock. It was soft, barely there, like a bird tapping against glass. She stood at the stove, stirring nothing, watching steam rise from a pot that had long since gone cold. The sound came again. 3 taps, small knuckles against old wood. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and walked slowly to the door. Her house sat at the edge of town, where the dirt road turned to dust and the buildings thinned out into open prairie. It was a place people passed through, not a place they stayed. The ranchers came and went. The cowboys drifted like tumbleweeds. The sheriff made his rounds once a week, tipping his hat, but never stopping long. And Martha preferred it that way. She opened the door just wide enough to see. A girl stood on the porch. Small, thin as a sapling. Her dress was torn at the hem, patched with fabric that didn't match. Her hair hung in dark tangles around her face, and her feet were bare, caked in red dust. But it was her eyes that stopped Martha cold. Deep brown, quiet, haunted. The girl looked up at her and said nothing. Her lips were cracked. Her hands were folded in front of her, fingers laced together like she was praying. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stood there waiting. Martha's chest tightened. She knew hunger when she saw it. This wasn't the kind that could wait until morning. This was the kind that had been gnawing at a child for days, maybe weeks. The kind that made bones show and skin go gray. "What do you want?" Martha asked, though she already knew. The girl's voice came out small and dry, like wind through dead grass. "Bread, ma'am. Just a piece of bread." Martha should have felt something then, pity, maybe, or kindness. But what she felt instead was a cold, heavy weight pressing down on her ribs. Because when the girl looked up at her, Martha saw someone else. Someone she had buried 3 years ago in the cemetery on the hill, beneath a stone that bore his name and nothing more. Her husband, not in the shape of the girl's face, not in the way she stood, but in her eyes, in the quiet sadness that lived there, the kind that didn't ask for help because it had learned not to expect it. Martha looked away. She turned back into the house, leaving the door half open. The girl didn't follow. She stood on the porch, still as a shadow, waiting to be told what to do. Inside, Martha moved to the wooden table where a loaf of bread sat beneath a linen cloth. She had baked it that morning out of habit, not hunger. She hadn't eaten much since he died. Food had lost its taste. Everything had. She tore off a piece, not a small piece, but not a generous one either. Enough to quiet the girl's stomach for a night. Enough to send her on her way. When she returned to the door, the girl was still there, hands folded, eyes down. Martha held out the bread. The girl took it carefully, as if it might disappear if she moved too fast. She didn't say thank you. She didn't smile. She just held it against her chest like it was something precious. "Go on now," Martha said quietly. The girl nodded. She turned and walked down the steps, her bare feet making no sound on the wood. Martha watched her go, watched her move down the road toward the center of town, where the saloon lights flickered yellow in the growing dark and the sound of men's laughter drifted out into the street. Martha closed the door. She stood there for a long moment, her hand still on the latch. Her heart was beating too fast. Her throat felt tight. She didn't know the girl, had never seen her before. But those eyes, those quiet, hollow eyes, they haunted her. She walked back to the stove and sat down at the table. The house was silent. It was always silent. 3 years of silence, and she had grown used to it. She had built her life around it. After he died, after the fever took him in the middle of a cold October night, she had closed herself off. She stopped going to church, stopped visiting the neighbors, stopped speaking unless spoken to. The other widows in town had tried to reach her at first, bringing casseroles and kind words, but Martha had turned them all away. She didn't want their pity. She didn't want their prayers. She wanted to be left alone with her grief, and eventually, they honored that wish. But tonight, something had broken through. Martha stared at the table, at the half loaf of bread still sitting there, at the empty chair across from her where he used to sit, reading the paper, or cleaning his rifle, or just watching her with that quiet smile he always wore. He had been a rancher, a good man, A man who worked with his hands and spoke with his silence. He never raised his voice, never drank too much, never wandered. He came home every night, kissed her forehead, and told her he loved her in the way a man does when he means it, steady and sure, like the sun rising. And then he was gone. The fever had come fast. One day he was fine. The next, he was burning up, talking to people who weren't there, calling out names she didn't recognize. She sat beside him for 3 days, pressing cool rags to his forehead, praying to a God she wasn't sure was listening. On the third night, he opened his eyes, looked at her, and smiled. And then he was gone. She'd buried him on the hill. The preacher said words. The townsfolk came and went. And Martha stood there in her black dress, dry-eyed and silent, feeling nothing but the weight of the wind. But tonight, when that girl had looked up at her, something had stirred. Something she thought had died with him. Martha rose from the table and walked to the window. She pulled back the curtain and looked out into the night. The street was empty now. The girl was gone. But somewhere out there, in the cold and the dark, she was still hungry, still alone. Martha let the curtain fall back into place. She didn't know why the girl's eyes had shaken her so deeply. She didn't know why she couldn't stop thinking about them. But as she stood there in the quiet of her empty house, she knew one thing for certain. She would see that girl again. Martha didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind move through the gaps in the wood. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the girl. Those hollow, haunted eyes. The way she had stood on the porch, so still, so silent, like she had learned long ago that the world didn't respond to noise. By dawn, Martha was already dressed. She tied her bonnet under her chin, pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders, and stepped out into the cold morning air. The town was still quiet. The saloon was dark. The general store hadn't opened yet. Only the blacksmith was awake, hammering metal in the distance, the sound ringing out like a bell across the empty street. Martha walked with purpose, though she wasn't entirely sure where she was going. She just knew she had to find answers. She had to know who the girl was, where she had come from, why her eyes looked so familiar. She stopped first at the post office where old Mr. Callahan sorted letters behind a wooden counter. He looked up when she entered, his spectacles sliding down his nose. "Morning, Mrs. Dalton," he said, his voice rough from years of pipe smoke. "Morning," Martha replied. She hesitated, then asked, "Have you seen a girl around town? Young, dark hair, barefoot?" Mr. Callahan frowned, setting down a stack of envelopes. "You mean the orphan?" Martha's heart skipped. "Orphan? Yes, ma'am. Showed up a few weeks back. Nobody knows where she came from. Just appeared one morning, sitting outside the church. The preacher tried talking to her, but she wouldn't say much. Just her name. Lily, I think it was. Lily." Martha repeated the name silently in her mind. It felt small, fragile, like something that could break if you held it too tightly. "Where is she staying?" Martha asked. Mr. Callahan shrugged. "Church steps mostly. Sometimes the barn behind the livery stable. The sheriff tried to find her a home, but nobody's willing to take her in. Times are hard, Mrs. Dalton. Folks got enough mouths to feed." Martha nodded slowly. She thanked him and left, stepping back out into the street. The sun was rising now, casting long shadows across the dirt road. A stagecoach rattled past, kicking up dust. A cowboy rode by on horseback, tipping his hat to her without slowing down. She walked toward the church. It was a small, simple building at the edge of town, painted white but faded gray by the sun and wind. The steps were wooden, worn smooth by years of footsteps. And there, huddled in the corner near the door, wrapped in a thin blanket, was the girl. Lily. She was awake, but barely. Her eyes were half closed, her head resting against the wall. The blanket was torn at the edges, barely enough to keep the cold out. Martha stopped at the bottom of the steps, her breath catching in her chest. The girl looked so small, so fragile, like a bird that had fallen from the nest and didn't know how to fly. Martha didn't approach. She didn't speak. She just stood there, watching, her mind racing with questions she didn't know how to ask. Who was this child? Where'd she come from? And why? Why did her eyes look so much like his? Martha turned and walked back toward her house. Her hands were shaking. Her throat felt tight. She didn't understand what she was feeling. It wasn't pity. It wasn't kindness. It was something deeper, something that scared her. When she reached home, she went straight to the kitchen. She baked bread, more than she needed. She wrapped half the loaf in cloth, along with a piece of dried meat and an apple from the barrel in the cellar. Then she walked back to the church. The girl was still there, sitting in the same spot, staring at nothing. Martha set the bundle down on the step, a few feet away from her. Lily's eyes flickered toward it, then toward Martha. But she didn't move, didn't reach for it, just watched. "It's for you," Martha said quietly. Lily didn't respond. She looked at the bundle, then back at Martha, as if waiting for something, waiting for the catch, the condition, the price. Martha swallowed hard. "You don't have to say anything. Just take it." She turned and walked away before the girl could respond, before she could see if Lily took the food or left it there to rot. But the next morning, when Martha returned, the bundle was gone, and so it became a routine. Every morning, Martha would bake bread. Every morning, she would walk to the church and leave food on the steps. And every morning, Lily would be there, silent and still, watching her with those deep, haunted eyes. Martha never spoke, never asked questions. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to bridge the distance between them. So she just left the food and walked away, her heart heavy with something she couldn't name. Days passed, then a week, then two. The widow found herself thinking about Lily constantly. At night, when the house was silent. In the morning, when she stirred the fire. While she swept the floor, or mended clothes, or stared out the window at the empty prairie stretching endlessly toward the horizon. She thought about the girl's eyes, about the way she sat so still, like she had learned to disappear, about the way she ate, slowly, carefully, as if every bite might be her last. And she thought about her husband, about the way he used to sit at the table, quiet and thoughtful, his eyes carrying a sadness he never spoke about, a sadness that lived deep inside him, like a wound that never healed. Martha had asked him about it once, early in their marriage. "What are you thinking about?" she had said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. He had smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing, darling. Just tired." But it wasn't nothing. She had always known that. He carried something with him, something from before he met her, something he never shared. And now, looking at Lily, Martha wondered if that something had been a secret, a past, a life he never told her about. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. It was impossible, foolish. The girl was just an orphan, a stranger, a child who needed help. But every time Martha looked into those eyes, she saw him staring back. The cold came early that year. By mid-morning, frost still clung to the wooden planks along the boardwalk, and the wind carried the sharp bite of winter across the prairie. Martha pulled her shawl tighter as she walked toward the general store, her breath rising in pale clouds. She had gone to buy flour and salt, nothing more. But when she turned the corner near the store, she saw her. Lily. The girl was sitting on the ground beside the store's front steps, her back pressed against the wall. Her thin dress offered no protection against the cold. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and her whole body was shaking. Her lips had turned blue. Her bare feet were red and raw. Martha stopped. Her chest tightened. "Lily," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes were glassy, distant. She didn't speak. Martha walked closer, kneeling down beside her. "You'll freeze to death out here. Why aren't you at the church?" Lily shook her head, her teeth chattering. "The preacher, he said I can't stay there anymore. Said it's not proper. Said I need to find somewhere else." Martha felt anger rise in her chest. The preacher, a man who spoke every Sunday about mercy and compassion, and yet he had turned a child out into the cold. "Come on," Martha said, reaching out her hand. "You're coming with me." But Lily didn't take her hand. Instead, she pulled something from the pocket of her dress. It was small, tarnished, hanging from a thin chain. A locket. She held it out toward Martha, her fingers trembling. "This was my mama's," she whispered. She told me to keep it safe, that it was important. Martha stared at the locket. It was old, the brass worn and scratched. The kind of thing a woman might wear close to her heart, carrying memories too precious to speak aloud. "Can I see it?" Martha asked gently. Lily hesitated, then nodded. She placed the locket in Martha's palm. It was cold to the touch. Martha turned it over, examining the delicate engravings on the surface. Flowers, vines, worn almost smooth by time. There was a small clasp on the side. She pressed it with her thumb. The locket opened, and the world stopped. Inside was a photograph. Small, faded, but clear enough. A man and a woman, standing side by side. The woman was young, dark-haired, with a soft smile and kind eyes. She wore a simple dress, her hand resting gently on the man's arm. But it was the man who stole Martha's breath. It was her husband, younger, thinner, his hair darker, his face unlined by age or work. But it was him, the same eyes, the same quiet smile, the same way he stood, with his shoulders slightly back, his hands at his sides, as if he didn't quite know what to do with them. Martha's hands began to shake. She stared at the photograph, her mind racing, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Oh," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who is this woman?" Lily looked down at her hands. "My mama," she said quietly. "She died last winter. The fever took her, same as it took everyone else in our town." Martha couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world around her blurred. The wind, the cold, the voices of people passing by on the street, all of it faded into silence. "And this man?" Martha asked, her voice cracking. "Who is he?" Lily looked up at her, confusion flickering in her eyes. "That's my papa," she said. "I never met him. Mama said he left before I was born. Said he didn't know about me. She kept the locket so I'd know what he looked like. So I know I came from someone." Martha's vision blurred with tears. She closed the locket and handed it back to the girl, her hands trembling so badly she almost dropped it. "Keep it safe," she whispered. She stood up, her legs unsteady beneath her. She turned and walked away, not toward the general store, not toward home, but toward the edge of town, where the buildings ended and the desert began. She needed air, needed space, needed to be somewhere the world couldn't see her fall apart. When she was far enough away, she stopped. She pressed her hands to her face and let the tears come. He had lied to her. For all those years, he had looked her in the eyes, held her hand, kissed her forehead, and told her he loved her. And all that time, he had carried a secret, a past, a woman he had loved before her, a child he had never known existed. Martha's mind spun with questions. Had he loved the woman in the photograph? Had he left her willingly, or had something forced him away? Did he ever think about her? Did he ever wonder if there was a child somewhere growing up without him? And why? Why had he never told her? She thought back to those quiet moments when she had seen sadness in his eyes. The times he had stared out the window at nothing, lost in thoughts he never shared. She had always assumed it was the weight of work, the burden of survival, the hard life of a rancher on the frontier. But now she knew. It wasn't the land that haunted him. It was the past. A past he had buried so deep that even in his final moments, burning with fever and calling out names she didn't recognize, he had never spoken the truth. Martha wiped her eyes and looked back toward the town. She could see Lily still sitting by the general store, small and fragile, clutching the locket like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. And in that moment, Martha understood. This child, this orphan, this hollow-eyed girl was his daughter, his flesh and blood, left alone in a world that had shown her no mercy, abandoned by a father who had never known she existed, lost to a mother who had died with nothing but a locket and a photograph to leave behind. The betrayal cut deep, deeper than Martha thought anything could. But beneath the anger, beneath the hurt, there was something else, something she couldn't name. Because when she looked at Lily, she didn't just see the girl. She saw him. She saw the man she had loved, the man she had buried, the man who had been good and kind and honest, except in this one thing. And she saw herself, a widow, alone, carrying grief like a stone in her chest. The difference was she had a choice. She could walk away. She could leave Lily to survive on her own, the way so many others had. She could protect herself from the pain of the truth, close her door, and let the past stay buried. Or she could do something else. Martha took a long, shaking breath. She looked up at the sky, gray and heavy with clouds. The wind moved through the dry grass, carrying the smell of dust and distance. And she made her decision. Martha walked back toward the general store. Her steps were slow, deliberate, each one heavy with the weight of what she now knew. The wind pushed against her, cold and sharp, but she didn't turn away. She kept moving forward. Lily was still sitting against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. She looked up when Martha approached, and there was something in her eyes, not hope, but something quieter. Something that looked like resignation, like she had learned long ago not to expect anything. Martha knelt down beside her. She reached out and gently touched the girl's shoulder. Lily flinched, just slightly, as if kindness itself was foreign to her. "Come with me," Martha said softly. Lily stared at her, uncertain. Where? Home. The word hung in the air between them. Home. A place Lily hadn't had in a long time. Maybe ever. "I don't have anything to give you," Lily whispered. "I can't pay you." Martha shook her head. "I'm not asking you to." She stood and held out her hand. For a long moment, Lily didn't move. She just looked at Martha's hand, as if trying to understand what it meant, what it would cost her. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Martha helped her to her feet. The girl was lighter than she should have been, fragile as a bird. Her hand was cold, her fingers thin and bony. Martha wrapped her shawl around Lily's shoulders and led her down the street, past the saloon where cowboys sat drinking in the dim light, past the livery stable where horses stamped and snorted in their stalls, past the sheriff's office where the lawman tipped his hat as they passed. The town watched them. Martha could feel the eyes on her back, the widows whispering behind their hands, the ranchers pausing in their work to stare, the store owner standing in his doorway, arms crossed, frowning. She didn't care. She kept walking, her hand holding Lily's, until they reached the edge of town where her small house stood alone against the open prairie. Inside, the house was warm. Martha had left the fire burning that morning, and the air smelled faintly of smoke and bread. She led Lily to the table and pulled out a chair. "Sit," she said gently. Lily sat, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes wide and watchful. She looked around the room as if she didn't know what to do with herself, as if she had forgotten what it felt like to be inside, to be warm, to be safe. Martha went to the stove and stirred the fire. She filled a kettle with water and set it to boil. Then she pulled out flour, salt, butter. She began to knead dough, her hands moving slowly, methodically, the way she had done 1,000 times before. Lily watched her in silence. "When did you last eat?" Martha asked, not looking up. "Yesterday," Lily said quietly. "You left bread at the church." Martha nodded. She shaped the dough into a loaf and set it in the oven. Then she turned and looked at the girl, really looked at her. She saw her husband's eyes, his quiet sadness, his gentle soul, but she also saw something else. She saw a child who had survived when the world had tried to break her, a child who had learned to be invisible, to ask for nothing, to expect nothing, a child who had been abandoned, not once, but over and over again. And Martha saw herself, a widow who had closed her heart after loss, who had chosen solitude over pain, who had let grief harden into silence. But sitting across from her was proof that the past was never truly buried. It lived on, in a locket, in a photograph, in the eyes of a child who didn't even know she had been loved. Martha poured tea into 2 cups and set one in front of Lily. The girl wrapped her hands around it, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. She didn't drink, just held it, as if the heat itself was enough. "Tell me about your mother," Martha said, sitting down across from her. Lily looked down at the table. "She was kind," she said softly. "She worked hard. We didn't have much, but she always made sure I had something to eat. She used to sing to me at night. Old songs. Sad ones mostly. Did she ever talk about your father?" Lily nodded. "Sometimes. She said he was a good man. She said he didn't know about me, that he left before she could tell him. She didn't blame him for it. She said sometimes life just pulls people apart. Martha's throat tightened. She looked down at her own hands, rough and worn from years of work. She told me his name once. Lily continued. Thomas. Thomas Dalton. Martha closed her eyes. Hearing his name spoken aloud, in this house, by this child, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He was gone. But here, sitting at his table, was the daughter he never knew he had. I'm sorry, Martha whispered. I'm sorry he never got to meet you. Lily looked up at her, confusion flickering in her eyes. Why are you sorry? You didn't do anything. Martha opened her eyes and looked at the girl. Because I was his wife, and I didn't know. I should have known. Lily shook her head. It's not your fault. Mama said, she said, sometimes people carry secrets because they're too heavy to share. She said it doesn't mean they didn't love you. It just means they didn't know how to let go. Martha felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them away and stood, turning back to the stove. The bread was ready. She pulled it from the oven, the crust golden and warm. She sliced it carefully, placed a piece on a plate, and set it in front of Lily. Eat, she said softly. Lily picked up the bread with both hands and took a small bite. Then another. And another. She ate slowly, savoring each piece, as if afraid it might disappear. Martha sat back down and watched her. And as she watched, something inside her began to shift. The anger she had felt, the betrayal, the hurt, it was still there. But it was softer now, quieter, because she realized something. Her husband hadn't been perfect. He had made mistakes. He had carried secrets, but he had also been kind, loyal, loving. And the child sitting across from her was proof that he had loved someone once before her, that he had been capable of love, even if he hadn't known how to hold on to it. And maybe that was enough. When Lily finished eating, she looked up at Martha. Thank you, she said quietly. Martha reached across the table and took the girl's hand. You don't have to thank me. Why are you doing this? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you helping me? Martha hesitated. She could have told her the truth, could have shown her the locket, explained who her father was, told her that they were connected by blood and loss. But something stopped her. Not yet. Not like this. Instead, she said, because everyone deserves a home. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She looked down, her shoulders shaking. Martha stood and walked around the table. She knelt beside the girl and wrapped her arms around her, holding her the way a mother would. The way her husband's first love might have. The way she wished someone had held her when he died. Lily cried silently, her small body trembling. And Martha held her, her own tears falling into the girl's dark hair. When the tears finally stopped, Martha pulled back and looked at Lily. You can stay here, she said, for as long as you need. This is your home now. Lily stared at her, disbelief written across her face. You mean it? I mean it. But I don't even know your name. Martha smiled, soft and sad. My name is Martha. And from now on, you're not just Lily. You're Lily Dalton. The girl's eyes widened. Dalton? Martha nodded. It's your name. It always was. You just didn't know it yet. And in that moment, in the warmth of that small house on the edge of the prairie, two broken souls began to heal, not by forgetting the past, but by choosing to live beyond it.